Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. We need to chat. I'm going to get to some news on Andy Ruiz Jr. and Eddie Hearn both doubling down on their respective positions. That'll be later in the video, but first I wanted to go through a few thoughts on this whole evolving situation of Ruiz Jr. not wanting to go to Saudi Arabia. Just some of these peripheral issues, some of the things on my mind, because this has certainly become a very hot button issue. My previous video, over 700 comments on that. Just, people are divided on this. And a typical video that I'll have somewhere between 1 and 300 comments. So 700 or 700 plus, that shows you that people really do have a view. Ruiz Jr. refusing to go to Saudi Arabia. He wants the rematch on his own terms in the USA, his home country. And it really has set off a firestorm in boxing comment sections like mine, others on YouTube, forums elsewhere on the internet, fans divided, fans sounding off, and of course the inevitable, the cringeworthy fanboys on either side. They are well off the leash. They're piling in with some of their radical views of their own. Settle down, settle down. Some of these so-called fans, they're more intent, they're more about the drama, the divisiveness of this whole situation, rather than the actual boxing itself. I don't think some of these people want the rematch. They flourish on the uncertainty, in part because they want to push their own views, which are often drawn along promotional lines. And if you're one of these so-called fans, give yourself an uppercut. Give yourself another for good measure. It really is embarrassing. I'm embarrassed for you when I read your comments. It's patently obvious there is a bunch of these guys going from comment section to comment section, trolling and abusing other commenters, really just for, whatever reason. It is a bit sad. Actually, it's a lot sad. And what it reminded me of was those bad 12 months or so where we had the Wilder and Joshua negotiations. I mean, how painful was that, honestly? How boring did that become? How divisive was that? We don't need that again. But it appears some of these so-called boxing fans are really thirsting for another chapter of that utter BS. They want the bitterness. They want the nasty side of boxing. They are the nasty side of boxing. And the whole politics of boxing, this whole situation, other situations like this, that the sport is continually involved in, it is what drives fans away. No wonder boxing is such a fringe and niche sport. The out-of-the-ring issues are more dramatic often than what happens in the ring. And fighters and promoters, they are guilty of pitting fans against each other to serve their own purposes, and often for short-term gain. The long-term result can be fans just going, I can't be bothered anymore. But reading through some of the comments, everyone has a view. Some people were not happy with my position that if in fact Ruiz has signed up to a deal that allowed Eddie Hearn and Anthony Joshua to control the rematch, where it was, when it was, that they dictated the terms, that Ruiz should honour it. I think if he signed up to it, knowing what the clauses were, I think he should honour it. But there was certainly a vein of commentary from quite a lot of fans that were saying, you haven't seen the contract. Well, I've got news for you. Neither have you. You have not seen the contract. I haven't seen the contract. None of us will see the contract. That much is clear. But this whole thing with people saying, you haven't seen the contract, you don't know what's in it, but then they're automatically siding with Andy Ruiz Jr. for the most part. I mean, come on. Another vein of comments that came through really strongly was that the champ calls the shots. Andy Ruiz Jr. is the champ. He won. He now dictates what happens because he's the champ. And I can see what people are saying, but what does that mean for contracts? If in fact this is to be the case now, does this not set a dangerous precedent for the sport? I mean, sure, boxing is shady at the best of times, but if you have legal documents which are supposedly ironclad and you're just going to ignore them, they're not worth the paper that they're written on. I mean, what does that mean for the sport going forward? it would become even more treacherous than it already is, because people will be signing up to all sorts of conditions, wild conditions that give the champion all sorts of rights and considerations, and then they just turn around and go, nah, I won, so that doesn't matter anymore. So what if, for example, in a couple of months, Luis Ortiz upsets Deontay Wilder? Does he all of a sudden have no say, and that Luis Ortiz can do whatever he wants? I mean, we can't have it both ways, because some of the people that are lobbying for Ruiz, I think they'd be in a very different position if it was Wilder who was on the back of the loss here and looking to enforce the contract. Another really strange theme that came through was because the contract, and this is what people are saying, people who have not seen the contract, saying that, people can't talk about the contract, but then they'll say the contract didn't have a location in it, so Ruiz is in control, and that Hearn is lying. But lying about what, though? Since the rematch clause was triggered in June, all I can remember hearing from Eddie Hearn consistently is that they would advise when the date and the venue was to be confirmed, and that was in the works in terms of working out where it would be and when it would be, that various locations were being considered. I didn't hear too many people complaining when New York was one of the front runners, but when it was sort of taken off the table, that's when some of the rhetoric ramped up, not only from fans but also from Andy Ruiz Jr. But what has he lied about? What's changed in what he said? I mean, I think if people are being honest with themselves, they're probably quick to call Hearn a liar because he's a promoter. Promoters can be a bit tricky, a bit snaky. They can't lie straight in bed. And I think maybe support for rival promoters or a rival promotional banner that they support maybe has something to do with, their position on this, and that they are quick to just jump on board to what the boxer is saying and Andy Ruiz Jr., even if there's nothing really in what he's saying that goes into any detail. They want to believe the boxer over the promoter. And I can understand that, but it doesn't mean that because Andy Ruiz Jr. is saying he calls the shots, it's going to be on his terms, that he actually has that power in the contract. I mean, at this point, have we heard Andy Ruiz Jr. go into any detail on the contract or refute what Eddie Hearn has said? We haven't really heard that. He just wants to negotiate the fight on his terms and for it to be in the United States. Is there a loophole for him and his team to exploit? We just don't know. But he's talking very big for a guy supposedly locked into a contract with supposedly little room to move. And why is that? As I covered in a video the other day, which I'll put it up at the end of this one, if he can stall, he can put the date at risk. Maybe he can benefit from that, get a better deal. He's got a bit of leverage here. The event is now locked in. If he can put it at risk and make a few people nervous, maybe he can barter and negotiate to a better position. Well, that's, I'm sure, what he's hoping for. And he's told ESPN Deportes, I have signed nothing yet. We are negotiating everything. The fight they want to do there, in brackets, in Saudi Arabia, but we have to see where we negotiate with my team. I would like in New York again, where I won. I'll give him a chance to try beat me, and if he wants the belts, then he has to do it there. And so, according to Ruiz, everything is up for negotiation, which really is code for give me lots and lots and lots more money. And some of what Ruiz is saying, it doesn't quite gel with some of what his trainer Manny Robles just told Fight Hype in an interview on August 11th. He said, at the end of the day, we're willing to fight any place, anywhere. That's what a true champion does. I'll let that settle in. And he went on to say in that same interview, they're willing to go anywhere, and that included Saudi Arabia, but he did make it clear he hasn't been involved in negotiations. So his position is not from the negotiating table. He's just as Andy Ruiz Jr.'s trainer, and obviously he feels that Ruiz Jr. would go anywhere to fight. But as we're seeing at the moment, that may not be the case. But it could all be about positioning, about negotiating a better deal for himself. And clearly that's part of it. And he wants it on his own terms and preferably in the United States. Whether that can happen or not is another story, because Eddie Hearn, he is doubling down saying of Ruiz, his choice is to have a legal battle that could put him out of boxing for years, or to defend his belts for a lot of money against a guy he's already beaten. There isn't any doubt he will take the fight. Eddie Hearn's comments to Sky Sports. So, this whole thing, messy, murky, It looks like the lawyers will be brought in, and that the lawyers might be the winners at the end of the day, and maybe the fanboys too, because they are out in force at the moment. And I had been thinking about some of what's been going on and what people are saying in comment sections, and there is certainly another vein of commentary that's been coming through, that some people who had been supporting Andy Ruiz Jr. and respected him after his win over Anthony Joshua are fast losing respect for him, given his stance and what he's now doing. So I think some of the popular support that he had in the wake of his huge win over Joshua, it might be ebbing away. But, I guess the question is, does that matter? Maybe not. But let the barking begin. Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.